എല്ലാവർക്കും സ്വാഗതം മലയാള മനോരമയുടെ വെബിനാർ സീരീസിലേക്ക്. ഇത് 3 വെബിനാർസിന്റെ ആദ്യത്തെ വെബിനാറാണ്. ഈ വെബിനാറിൽ നമ്മളോട് 3 അതിഥികളുണ്ട്. അവരെ പറ്റി ഞാൻ ഓരോരുത്തരെയും ക്ഷണിക്കുന്ന സമയത്ത് അവരെ പറ്റി പറയും. അതുകൂടാതെ ഇന്നലെയും മെഞ്ഞാന്നുമായിട്ട് ശ്രീ സാം പെട്രോഡയുമായിട്ട് ഏകദേശം 2 മണിക്കൂറിൽ ചർച്ച ചെയ്തതിന്റെ അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ വീഡിയോ ആയിട്ടുള്ള പ്രധാന ഭാഗങ്ങൾ ഒരു 15 മിനിറ്റ് വീഡിയോയും കാണിക്കുന്നതായിരിക്കും. ശ്രീ സാം പെട്രോഡ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് എല്ലാവർക്കും അറിയാവുന്നതുപോലെ ഇന്ത്യയിലെ ടെക്നോളജി റെവല്യൂഷൻ, അതായത് നമ്മുടെ ടെലികോം റെവല്യൂഷന് പ്രധാന പങ്ക് വഹിച്ച വ്യക്തിയാണ്. അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ കാലയളവ് അതുപോലെ തന്നെയാണ് ഇന്ത്യയിലെ ടെക്നോളജി മിഷൻസ്, നമ്മുടെ വാട്ടർ മിഷൻ, പോളിയോയുടെ അതിനെല്ലാം പുറകിൽ പ്രവർത്തിച്ച വ്യക്തിയാണ്. അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ വളരെ വളരെ ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റിംഗ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള തോട്ട്സ് ആയിരുന്നു. അദ്ദേഹം the kind of thoughts which came out from his talk was very interesting, and Manorama has tried to capture that in about 18 minutes, and they of course wrote a very nice piece today in the Manorama on that. So the way this is going to work is that we will have the speakers first talk, then we will after the video we'll have a speakers talk, then we will have another round for the speakers. But whatever questions that the audience has, please keep keying in your questions, and we will pick up those questions after the second round of discussions among the panelists. The idea is to come out with very clear, firm recommendations to the government of Kerala on what do we do post-COVID for development. And there are many topics that were selected, which include manufacturing, IT, tourism, healthcare, industry related to agriculture, startups. So it is a very open subject, but we need to come out with very firm recommendations. So may I request for the video to be played first. Let me first introduce our first panelist for the day, Chandran Nair. Chandran Nair is, I have a very interesting thing that's happening on this panel today. I've got 3 people from College of Engineering, Trivandrum, and I'm the only guy from TKM on this. So, Chandran Nair is originally from Trivandrum, several years with National Instruments. He was managing director looking after the whole of Asia. He then moved out of that, joined Singapore Technologies. He presently is the group president and the CEO designate for AEM, a very large semiconductor company in Singapore. Chandran, of course, has an interest, substantially worked in areas like China, Japan, whole of Asia, worked with multinational companies, and definitely has a view on what's been happening on the higher end of technology and on the manufacturing side. So, Chandran, maybe we'll first start off hearing what you have to say, and then we will go to the other panelists, and of course come back to you. So you have about 7 to 8 minutes to come in with your initial thoughts on what Kerala should be doing and where we should be going.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll just share some of my views. I'm not completely sure that I have too many policy recommendations, but I'll share some of my views and share where I see both technology moving, how COVID has impacted all of us, and some of the areas I think, especially from a Kerala point of view, where we could help fill some gaps. Now, I'm not sure if we can call it post-COVID or living with COVID world, right? Because that is still yet to be seen. There are some short-term and longer-term uncertainties about the impact of COVID and how long it will last in our different societies. But there are some things for sure we know what's happening. One is the bifurcation of the China and US, both from a political system point of view and the way their economies are moving and the way technology is shared, or rather not being shared. There is a clear diminishing impact of globalism. The second part that is again very certain, irrespective about the length of this crisis and how we come out of it, is a lack of global leadership. The US themselves are extremely fragmented and highly polarized, very inward-looking, and a weakening of science-driven policy that used to be a strength of the US in the past. And with China, there is a general level of distrust from a geopolitical aspect and with regards to transparency. However, the strong centralized national policy in China is able to monopolize the people and the economy at a scale that is probably unmatched by any other country. Then when you take a step back and look at the overall macro and mega trends in technology, continues to see 5G, edge computing, cheap access to sensor technology, the proliferation of mobile technology, big data, all these things that are the buzzwords for the last few months and years continue to drive a large part of the application development and the way technology companies are moving forward. So ahead of time, I need to apologize. Most of my focus is on the technology aspect because that's where I've been most exposed to and where I do most of my work. Now, in addition to some of these trends like electrification of transport, telemedicine, and additive manufacturing and 3D manufacturing, there's also the social issues of aging and decreasing population, especially in the educated world and the wealthier segments of society, which is driving the trends in robotics and artificial intelligence, and also renewing the focus on agriculture or automation in agriculture in a very different way. In addition to all these trends, the whole impact of COVID-19 has really spurred working remotely. The fact that we have events like these over the web, these kind of impact has also given a lot of people opportunities, right? Working remotely also could possibly mean a borderless and visa-free intellectual human capital that can be utilized across the globe much better than we have in the past before COVID-19, because almost every company is now forced to be able to use remote management and collaborative tools in a much more impactful way than they ever did before. Also, when you look at the dynamic of the supply chain, in the past, the supply chain was optimized primarily on efficiency and cost, while now the supply chain, in addition to cost and efficiency, is also a large part of it is a dynamic supply chain that requires some amount of local resilience, especially with the different shutdowns, lockdowns that are happening around the world. Now, when you translate these mega trends and the socio-economic and political moves in a larger world context, what does this mean for India and Kerala in particular? Okay? So looking at our strengths and looking at where our workforce is placed, IP generation activities, for example, software, continuing what has been started many years ago with the technology parts, with special focus on AI and machine learning, right? Organizations that can do that, startups that can really monetize these. Then looking at our large educated workforce, especially when you look at the number of degree holders in physics, chemistry, mathematics, and all that, to have specific policies to help train these graduates in the data sciences and data analytics. Even though machine learning and AI, a lot of people talk about it, a large part of making those programs successful is the kind of data that is fed into those machines, those learning engines. And that requires a good understanding of data. And I think, especially in Kerala, we are poised to have a good, well-educated, well-trained workforce that can be trained and skills developed in data sciences and data analytics. From a manufacturing point of view, from a government policy, a lot of infrastructure, of course, is required, right? But then there are aspects of additive manufacturing and 3D manufacturing that allow assembly houses that can be small, can be fairly mobile, and can really feed into a global supply chain. Lots of companies, including the one I work with now, are looking at not mega plants providing ultra cheap components for us, but really looking at 3D machining shops that are able to create parts in decent volume, not extremely high volume, but can work through a local resilience where we have, for example, plants in Malaysia, China, Vietnam, Singapore. When we've had lockdowns in these different countries, we've really had to grow our supply chain. So from that point of view, there are possibly some opportunities in Kerala. And from a policy point of view, the infrastructure of travel, telecommunications needs clearly to be improved. Right? The other Kerala-specific opportunities, the way I see them, is web-based education paradigms, right? Existing organizations and new organizations to be able to develop on creating content, because we have a very, very good intellectual property workforce as the core of who we are as a people in Kerala, and to monetize that and to work with the government to be able to really create policies that focus on skills as opposed to the paper degree, right? Skills and the ability to work them towards bringing forth these ideas and sharing them over the web are probably some of the areas we could work on. One of the things that COVID-19 has really brought to the forefront is food security. So agriculture and local resilience, that's a whole area that can help with regards to growing the economy, and policies can be put in place to help with things like robotics and automation that can help increase the yield, can increase safe practices of agriculture, and can also actually spur the whole organic agriculture. And I think Kerala is very well poised to do that. Now, the economy and ecology clearly cannot be separated. So as government policy is being put in place to make sure we don't make some of the same mistakes that were done in some of the fast developing countries where environmental protection was not taken into account. And I think we have an educated population that can make sure has a good balance of that. But really, from the policy point of view, a skills-based education focus, and infrastructure investment in transport, electricity, and communication infrastructure is what I would recommend. And I would really like to part on a saying from Charles Darwin, which says, "It's not the strongest of us that survives, neither is it the most intelligent, it's the most adaptable." And I think that is the attitude, both from a policy framework and a workforce, that we need to adopt. So on that note, Vijayaraghavan, I'll pass it on.
Thank you, Chandran Nair, for those initial remarks. We have about 200 people listening to this webinar at this point of time, and we hope there are questions which have already started coming in. But a good way to start off, and the main things you of course talked about is a kind of importance on machine learning and AI coming up. There is definitely a possibility when you look at decentralized kind of manufacturing for Kerala to have opportunities in that, subject to, of course, the condition that we really look at infrastructure improvement, and I think a lot on logistics, how fast it gets cleared from the airport would all be very, very important. Also, you talked about the web-related education, the kind of opportunities that come from there, indirectly in terms of the IP that can be created from here. So interesting points that are there. Let's listen to what Raj has to say. Rajkumar, again, College of Engineering, Trivandrum, studied in North Carolina, did his master's there, worked with GE for several years, worked in the US, worked in Japan, then I think worked in Hong Kong, came to Singapore, and he then was presently his company he's a partner and director at Symphony Asia. Earlier they used to be they're a listed company, make investments all around the world mainly, but initially they were what they call Schroeder partners, and during that period have made investments, several major investments in India, including top names that we hear about like Apollo, Blue Dart, Strides, several others, and Trivandrum-based Suntech was also one of the investments which they had made in. Raj is somebody who's been wanting to do something in Kerala for a long time. I hope we'll briefly talk about the delays that came up there, but I would like to hear more about what he thinks for Kerala, It may be good also to tell what you're looking at in terms of how many people like you who are you, Chandran, Tony, and others who worked internationally for so long can really do in terms of trying to develop what we already have here. Over to you, Raj.
Okay. Thank you very much, Vijay. When GVR first said that we have to have very specific policy recommendations, I was thinking, if you want to make specific policy recommendations, you should know what the future is going to be. And I really don't know what the future is going to be, except that it's going to be different from the past. So I said, okay, what should I do? I should maybe look at some of my portfolio companies. We have portfolio companies stretching from Dubai to Japan. And these are companies we invested in. And we looked at what's happening to all these companies in the context of COVID. The interesting thing is there's a wide dispersion in the impact of COVID on these businesses. Many of the more software-oriented companies are doing quite well. In fact, one of them they're working 6 days a week instead of 5 days a week. And they're saying their sales productivity has shot up because they're using Zoom to meet people, especially their prospective clients from around the world. So the sales productivity has gone up tremendously. Then we have heavily invested in hospitality. We have hotels all around the world, and they are struggling. And we have seen this before during the 9/11 crisis, as well as during the SARS epidemic and during the Bali bombing and so on. The high-end tourists don't care about the economics. Whether the economy is doing well or poorly, they travel, they go to hotels, they enjoy luxury properties. But the moment their safety is questioned, whether it's through a pandemic or through a terrorist act, they just hunker down and they just stop using these facilities. So even within hospitality, I think right now they're all struggling. But the high-end hotels are going to struggle longer, I think, until people feel safer to use them. But whereas a medium to low-level tourism and the hospitality business will pick up as and when we, stop the lockdowns and go back to normal life. So looking at many of our portfolio companies, and I quite agree with Chandran on many of the points he's saying. I said, what are the two things that I think for certain that we are going to see different in the future? So remote working, when I started working from home, initially I was very anxious. I said, how am I going to do this? I used to get on a plane, travel around, do things, go to the office every day. And now after 1.5 months of working from home, I love it. Now I'm anxious about going back to office. I don't want to go back to the office. So you'll see that we are going through a behavioral change. So the two themes I want to talk about is one is the remote working, the automation part. And the automation, I say it because Chandran mentioned the US-China dispute and the fact that everybody is waiting for a slice of the manufacturing that's going to come out of China. I'm not so hopeful about that, mainly because when you shift your supply chain, I don't think you're just going to replace what we have with the same thing in some other location. People are going to redraw, people are going to rejigger the whole manufacturing process, the whole supply chain. So, and I think that a lot of automation is going to come in. So if you think a company is employing 10,000 employees in China now, if they move it to India, I don't think there'll be 10,000 employees. It could be 1,000 employees for all you know. So we need to take into account that when these supply chains shift, they also evolve and morph into something completely different. And I don't know if that is going to be attractive for India or not. It will be to a large extent, but I don't know if it's going to help Kerala. I also want to say something about foreign companies looking at putting money in the ground in a particular country. 10 years ago, I was talking to a friend at Intel, and Intel was setting up a new wafer fab facility, a facility to make computer chips. It's about a $1 billion investment. And they're looking at comparing Tamil Nadu to Vietnam. And in the end, they went with Vietnam, although Intel has got several facilities in India for R&D and so on. And I asked one of the senior people in Asia why that happened. And they said it's predictability. In Vietnam, we know that if we put $1 billion in the ground and the present government agrees to something, we know for the next 10, 15 years, we are still going to have it. It's going to keep producing. Whereas in India, we are not sure because policies shift with each change in the government. And that's something that makes it very risky to put a lot of capital to work in India. So if you notice, most of the companies that come into India are doing labor arbitrage or setting up R&D labs or business process outsourcing or something like that. Very few are actually building huge pharmaceutical plants or building huge semiconductor plants and things like that. So again, to say that no, things are going to be different, we are going to attract this kind of capital, I think might be wishful thinking, and maybe we should not probably spend much time on it. Which brings me to more of the remote working part. I remember in the early 90s, when I was a management consultant in the US, I'd go into many Fortune 500 companies, and the concept of somebody doing some work in India was completely alien to them. They said it's impossible. Software is something that's got to be done here, it's got to be designed here in our offices in collaboration with everybody else. But look at what has changed. And the trigger for that was the Y2K. And I'm sure Mr. Pitroda played a very large part in it, in launching the IT revolution in India, because a lot of Indian programmers were required to fix supposedly the issues that would be there when the calendar went from 1999 to 2000. And the Y2K really compressed the time. The trend was there, people were outsourcing and people were slowly, sending things out to India or other countries to do this. But what Y2K did was Y2K shrank the time. So in a very short period, Indian IT outsourcing, Indian BPOs, all of that shot up. So to me, I think that this is an opportunity. This is a Y2020, not a Y2K, Y2020, when a lot of things are going to compress, both the automation and the working from home or remote working part. So when it comes to remote working, right now, today there was a news story in the Financial Times that said Twitter has said employees need not come back to the office at all. From now on, they don't. In fact, Alphabet, that is Google, and Facebook said employees can work from home till the end of the year. But Twitter said they don't need to come back. They can work from home anytime they want for the rest of their life or the rest of their life with Twitter as an employee at Twitter. Now think of this, a company in New York that's paying $100,000 to an employee, a junior employee working in New York, is now going to pay $100,000 to the employee sitting in his home in New York. That is the first step. The second step is they'll wonder, why am I paying $100,000 to one of my own employees sitting in New York City when he could be sitting in a low-cost place like whether Dallas or somewhere in Arizona. And the next step is, why not Bangalore or why not Trivandrum or why not elsewhere? So we have seen a lot of outsourcing of business processes. I think it's called robotic process automation. But I think what you've seen is the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole new wave of remote working that's going to come as a result of COVID. At least this is my prediction. And take Kerala, for instance. What do we do about it? Now look at all the people from the Middle East who are going to be coming back to Kerala, mainly because of the oil price issue and because of COVID and so on. And from a Kerala perspective, I think we should focus on employment. How can we provide employment for these people? And we can provide employment for these people if they're able to work from home, that is work from Kerala, and do the same thing that they were doing in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or wherever else they were. But we have the technologies, we have the mindset right now. The question is, how do we do it? Instead of waiting for a large outsourcing company like Infosys or UST or so on to go to a client and put everything together, we need to empower the average person coming back to say, look, I was an accountant in company ABC in Dubai, and I had to come back now, but I can go back to my boss and say, look, I'll work from here in a safe and secure way so that the company's data is still secure, and I can still perform the work sitting in Kerala. So the challenge to us is, how do we empower them? So one idea I thought was we could have some kind of a remote working studios, fully air conditioned, good, strong broadband signal, and with workstations and so on, where individuals could actually go and sit there and work for companies around the world. This is a little bit of blue sky thinking, so I'm not saying that this is very practical in day one, but I'm just saying there should be a trend for this. And secondly, we should encourage more small company formation in Kerala. So a few people can get to and say, look, I'm going to put together a 5-person accounting shop, and I'm going to sell my services to, whether it's the Middle East or elsewhere. But you start with the Middle East and you can go somewhere else too. It could be a small design shop. It could be a small copywriting shop. Various things. So we need to sort of plant the seeds for SMEs to do remote working from Kerala and to serve the rest of the world.
Thanks, Raj. Interesting thoughts there about the work from home model that we talked about, which means very clearly it's not about providing jobs for people who come, but facilitating in such a manner that they look into the co-work kind of spaces that are there, and they can use that, and government provides that, where they can then be providing their services from here for someone, maybe their earlier employer itself. Which means you're talking about people becoming self-employed in a way, which is a very interesting part. The other one, of course, was the kind of things you talked about. The possibility of manufacturing coming could be. We need to clearly look at it, because it may not be that easy with the kind of things that are being done. Interesting thoughts on that. Also, there was something on automation. The opportunity on automation was something which is and I think there are a few companies who started doing it, but it doesn't prevent from a lot more. The opportunities would be very high. So, and that interesting thing about why Intel went to Vietnam, okay, instead of doing it in Tamil Nadu. Okay, that reminds me actually why years ago, when the Singapore Science Park and the Tatas decided that they wanted to get into the IT park program in India, Siak-Ching, whom you all know, they actually were looking at making the investment in Technopark in Trivandrum. They wanted to become a joint partner with Government of Kerala to develop Technopark further, but unfortunately, we were not prepared to allow private participation at that time. And instead, they went to Karnataka, and Parameshwara Holdings, actually, so Gopinath Pillai was supposed to be on this panel, who had a bad cold, so he couldn't come on. Parameshwara Holdings, Singapore Science Park and Ascendas, the Karnataka government and the Tatas set up the ITPL in Bangalore. It was supposed to have come here, but at that point of time, the mindset did not allow that. But about 5 years ago, I think somebody met the Ascendas CEO in Singapore and said, we want you to come to Kerala. And I think she at that point of time said, oh, we actually came nearly 20 years ago, but you said it was not possible. So at least times are changing now. Good. So interesting thoughts there from Raj. On the next round, I want you to talk about your CIE plans, etc. in the next round. But Tony, I know you're in Japan now, and you've actually in the last few years one of the biggest, most high visible projects that has come to Kerala has been Nissan's digital initiative in Trivandrum in the Technopark, and Tony was the person behind that. Tony was actually CIO in Vodafone and GE before joining Nissan in Japan. He has actually moved out of that position now. Where he's going is something which we might know sometime soon. But Tony, because of that, and you've been somebody who's been outside, but actually been in constant touch, probably coming home every week when you were with Vodafone and GE, and then in the recent past you've been on the digital advisory board for the government of Kerala, and you've been pushing on Kerala, but you've also been very open and quite critical about some of the things which the government has not been doing well, like, for example, the Trivandrum airport privatization and things like that. So, Tony, would be great to listen from you in terms of what your thoughts on the way forward post-COVID for Kerala. And after Tony speaks, we will try and put Sam Pitroda's video on before you go to the next round. Tony, please.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, GVR. Raj, thank you, as well as Chandran. This is very interesting time that we are going through. Every crisis brings opportunities, or every crisis can be treated as a time that we can dig ourselves in and not try to do something. The world, as we know, was operating as a flat world. Now, we could really think about it as one world because of all the digital boundaries all the physical boundaries being broken with digital, as both Raj and Chandran spoke about. Or we can think about, because my movements are restricted, I am going to operate much more in a silo. So that's the dichotomy, right? You have to figure out where you want to be. If you really look at the crisis in itself, exactly the same way. You can look at it as an opportunity, or you can look at it with fear and say that, I don't want to venture outside. I don't want to do something because I am probably going to kill myself if I do it. Or looking at the future, you can actually wait and say, I'm not going to do something. I'm not going to be the pioneer. I'm actually going to wait for someone else to do something and I'm going to follow. Now, these are some of the real challenges that, not just as individuals, but policymakers and beyond will be thinking about. Where do we go from here? Now, yesterday you heard our Prime Minister speak about, Indian Prime Minister speak about vocal for local, local for global, etc. Even before, these were in fashion, in vogue, and people talked about, I've been quite vociferous and vocal about bringing business locally to Kerala. And of course, GVR spoke about the needs and experience that we have, Actually, it is a very interesting experience because, when you look from outside, you hear about Kerala not being an investor-friendly state, the militant unionism, rampant corruption and things like that. But my experience with Nissan coming to Kerala was exactly the opposite. I saw a very decisive government led by the chief minister. The entire bureaucracy, decisions were made at lightning speed. There was absolutely no bureaucracy at all, preventing us from being successful. But even beyond, as GVR spoke about, I made quite a bit of noise about, for example, Hartal last year. And I think I even wrote an op-ed in my Manorama about the need for changing the culture of Hartal and how it is really destroying Kerala from moving forward. And I'm happy to say that government actually passed an ordinance to kind of protect private property, etc. And lo and behold, after that, the number of Hartals that we've seen in Kerala has come down quite significantly. Education is one area that I've worked very closely with the government as well. And this morning I got a message from our Principal Secretary, Usha Titus, who manages education, that Kerala government has taken up one of the initiatives that we've been pushing for, to have more industry connect and work more closely from a credit course, so that the students who graduate not just have theoretical knowledge, but actually do have real experience in the industry from people who are actually practitioners, so that the employability becomes much better. So all in all, when you really look at it, there are a lot of good opportunities. But where do we go from here? Again, we hear about a lot of people wanting to move out of China, and I completely agree with Raj. The fact that I also don't really believe that all that the supply chain disruption from China is going to come back into India. Even if it comes to India, how much of that is coming into Kerala? For example, if you take Japan, where everybody speaks about the $2.2 billion that Japan is earmarked to bring in from China, or remove the dependency of China. But in reality, 91% of that money is to bring business from China into Japan. So whatever is left is about $200 million for the entire rest of the world. Now, if you're not successful in a normal period, pre-COVID, as we did, what is making us any different tomorrow than yesterday? Nothing else. Just because the virus came to the world doesn't mean that India's existing problems have gone away. India is one place where we absolutely had some ridiculous things like, retrospective taxes for one of my previous companies that I worked with in Vodafone. So again, coming back to Raj's point earlier, if you cannot trust the fact that if something is written in a piece of paper, or something that the Supreme Court had said is right, is still not even respected in a country, how much of that what we can do? So you have to really take all this into account. But having said that, this brings, in my opinion, quite a bit of unique opportunities to Kerala. We already spoke about the decisive government that we have. But the Kerala now has a brand globally with respect to the healthcare, how we manage COVID. And probably everyone speaks about Kerala, used to speak about the social fabric of Kerala, how we were really good, but now people talk about the healthcare aspect of it. We have a bunch of very smart technology, tech-savvy youngsters, startups, etc., that are driving a lot of innovations. And we already spoke about a few names. We have ports, we have airports, waterways, railways. We have beautiful land, probably one of the best in the world anywhere. So I really believe that it's time for us to take Kerala not just as a traditional God's own country in the traditional tourism marketing perspective, but even move to beyond into maybe Apollo's own country, where your healthcare is something that we can take care of, or more into technology's own country, where we can take care of your digital business needs. We really don't want to have polluting industries in Kerala. We probably do not want to have heavy unionized labor kind of manufacturing, but we can still do digital manufacturing from here. So there are so many opportunities, JVR, when we really think about it. And I know that as we go through the rest of the time today, we can speak about some of that in specifics, but I'm really bullish. And I really believe that, we can do it. And I think the only thing that is standing between us and success is just our mindset.
Thank you, Tony, for, you've given a feel of what was when Nissan came in, and your thoughts on the Hartal and, of course, the airport, which was mentioned very much. But clearly, the opportunity is high. We need to see how we can seize that. Let us try to see whether we can have the video on. It just gives a feel of what Sam Pitroda discussed with me the day before. Actually, there was a very interesting conversation with Sam Pitroda. It went on for over 2 hours. And the highlights are what should come today.
Coronavirus is essentially World War III. So how do we look at life after coronavirus? One is, can we go back to what it was? Or two, we create a whole new world? Right now, thinking is how quickly we can go back to what it was. The standard question is, how do I create jobs? How do I bring investments? All the standard stuff. Okay, which is fine, because that's all people can think of. But the real challenge is to think completely outside the box and say, what kind of a world I really want after this? Do I really want a world where we focus on only consumption and destroy our environment? Do I want a world where I'm not going to burn any more coal? I'm going to create alternate energy? Do I want a world where education doesn't cost $100,000 a year tuition? Do I want a world where health is guaranteed to everybody? Do I want to create a world where rather than consumption, we focus on conservation? These are very complex issues. So I think we need to take baby steps. First baby step is, how do we get everybody feel comfortable? That doesn't mean you'll get to a point where everybody will have a job. So you got to make everybody feel comfortable. And that can only happen if states intervene and guarantee certain minimum income to everybody. So first and foremost task ahead of us is to make our people feel comfortable, that you will have enough to eat, there will be security, safety, food, shelter, while we are going to work on building new world. So we need to think of complete transformation of education, health, of economy, of the idea of job. Job doesn't mean 40 hours a week. See, the beauty of it, it democratizes everything. Two, it decentralizes everything. It gives me power in democracy. It gives me information, but it also gives me power. So one, it democratizes information. Two, it decentralizes, and 3, it demonetizes. So how do we create new models for everything we do, knowing clearly as to what is important and what is not important? So to me, the most important thing is environment. Opportunities in environment. Clean air, better forest, clean water, handling of garbage. That whole area of global warming, alternate energy, all that is one big opportunity. Second big opportunity is education. Kerala could be the hub of global education. Forget about Indian education. Kerala could be a hub of global health. You are blessed with great weather. You are blessed with great forest and trees and environment. You are also blessed with lot of talent, huge diaspora, great ocean front. You have everything going for you, except the mindset.
Except the
Mindset.
okay.
We are locked up in certain mindset. Kerala is also a great example of diversity. Kerala is a great example of, secularism. Okay, I admire Kerala in many ways, but I have never had a chance to really express it in this way. How do we make Kerala a focal point of transformation? And we need to demonetize a lot of things. Telecom has already been demonetized. You and I can conduct video conference at 0 cost. Can we demonetize health? Can we demonetize education? If we begin to do that and use technology to produce more food, reduce cost of food, then you don't need to work 40 hours a week to live a reasonable life. Kerala has some great industries on clothing. Okay. There's some great textile and
Traditional and all that, yes.
all that.
Handloom and things like that.
Exactly. So that's one industry to build. Using new technology, using new tools, whether it is 3D printer or better graphics or better design or global market for luxury goods, all that is a huge global opportunity. Second industry would be food, whether it's Kerala's coconut or Kerala's fruits or Kerala's whatever. Can we really look at the entire food chain? Start from cultivation, not with chemical fertilizers, with biofertilizers, not by using modern technology as people call technology, but going back to basics, focusing on local genetic pool, local cow, local dung, okay, zero cost farming, because there is so much food value in the local genetic pool. The third area would be health, and we can work out the entire health architecture. Right from eating right, exercising, understanding yourself, controlling your weight, to using herbal medicine, to all the way to modern surgery. Idea is not to build a 5-star hospital. Idea is to create a wellness
Culture.
And that doesn't mean only yoga and massage. Okay. See, we tend to just take one and go vertical and close everything else. You got to look at the entire value chain. Fourth, I would look at education. Fifth, I would look at your ocean front, whether it is creating better ports or fishery or mining the ocean, generating energy, all of that is very critical for Kerala. Then environment, waste management. Why should Kerala have so much waste? There's no reason for Kerala to have that kind of waste. Look at lakes are polluted. Everything is just bad. It's a huge opportunity. It's a huge industry. A lot can be done in Kerala. If you just focus on these 6, 7 things, enough work cut out for next 20 years. And today, world is focused on top-down development. Okay, there's a big plant and everything will happen. Okay, so Chinese succeeded in it because Chinese could use their political system. You see, today people write all kinds of Harvard Business Review articles on management style in Silicon Valley. We did that in early 80s, 40 years ago. See, we started technology mission 40 years ago because we realized that these things will not be possible in the existing governmental organizational architecture. So CDAC was an architectural change in organization. Autonomy, flexibility, freedom, all that has to be part of the organizational architecture if you want to execute. United Nations wrote a very interesting report on Indians' technology mission. Nobody has read it. Even Indians have not read it. I have a copy of it, which talks about the great idea of mission mode approach to get things done. But it is frightening to the existing system. You can do it yourself. You can do it either in communist government, non-communist government, Congress government, BJP government, don't make a difference. But do you have people who believe in this idea? You have people who understand intellectually. 40 years ago, when there was no mindset for privatization, deregulation, all that, had to do with 3 things. One, political will. Rajiv Gandhi had political will to say, I'm going to get this done. I'm behind it. I support it. I like it. I want to do it. You need political will from the government, state government saying, yes, I want to be helping people. Clothing industry. I want to help people in food industry. I want to help people in health industry, education industry, whatever. Then you got to create domain experts. Find 1 or 2 or 3 champions who really understand the subject, who are good leaders, who have no vested interest at heart. And then you got to find a lot of young talent. Do it. That's the difference in organizational architecture. Immunization mission. How did we eradicate polio today? No one understands. Polio got eradicated because Rajiv Gandhi and I had a meeting and we said, India has the largest number of polio patients and we do not make our own vaccine. He said, is that so? I said, yeah, I didn't know that. He said, why don't we make our own vaccine? So we called a meeting of 50, 60 doctors in India, including Dr. Jacob Jones from Vellore. And we said, what do we take to make vaccine? Everybody said it can't be done. Except few people who believed in the idea. So finally we said, we'll make vaccine, it will cost us 300 crores. In those days, Rajiv Gandhi said, fine, needed political will. Immediately, I talked to Jairam. I said, Jairam, let's send a person to Soviet Union, send a person to France, Mario, and start negotiations. We started blending vaccine. At that time, India did not make any vaccine in the country. We are the largest producer of vaccine in the world. You might want to do manufacturing in food processing. Let me give you one simple example, tomato. We import close to, I'm told, close to $1 billion worth of ketchup from China. You can check the figures, I may be wrong, but it's a huge number. That's because we do not have food processing industry to make ketchup of the kind we need. So we throw tomatoes on the street. Right now, I was talking to Maharashtra. They are throwing onions on the street because nobody's buying onions. So food processing is another big industry that you can get people to come invest. Another industry which we didn't talk about is housing. Construction is a big, big industry. Okay, housing is a huge opportunity, and we need to upgrade housing of our people. We can't live with the kind of housing we have. Why should I live for the rest of my life in 150,000 square feet? I want better housing. So can I create entire, supply chain for housing industry? Standard windows, standard wood, standard roof, standard nails, standard toolkit, and encourage people to upgrade their housing. Build better housing, low-cost housing, because that don't require a lot of foreign exchange. It requires a lot of work. Okay, so I would definitely put housing. We need to create a database of people like this, which is reliable, dependable, sustainable. Once you have a database like that, you can begin to harness it. So let's say 100,000 people came back. We need to find out how many are in which field. Can we use some of these on big data analytics for health? Are these education people? Are these construction people? What happens today, they all came and everybody talks about them, but nobody knows who the hell they are, where are they, what are they doing, what is their strength. You can just organize them as a group and they'll find their resources if you empower them. The history of Kerala, we should go in as Kerala before coronavirus, Kerala after corona. A whole new world. And to me, this is a model for the world, not just for India. All these guys don't understand it. Guy sitting in the center has no idea. Okay, they are not capable. Pardon me for saying it. Not that we are intelligent. I'm not saying that. But they are prisoner of their own system. So Gandhi taught me truth, trust, love, inclusion, diversity, honesty, ethics. Not rocket science, right? It's common sense. If we do these things, we can rise above and really transform Kerala. And Kerala is a great place to experiment. The best laboratory you can find. To identify for us 100 top people in Kerala. Not inside Kerala, outside Kerala also, but Keralites. Let's identify 10 top in these 8-10 fields I'm talking about. Okay? Let's get those 100 people together and have a video call. One by one on domain experts. I just had Shashi Tharoor was on a call with me. We had 500 people on web. Okay. But Shashi Tharoor can do certain things. But he can't do what we are trying to do. You need that domain expertise. So, if we take Manorama is a great platform. I have had great relationship with them for many, many years in Rajiv Gandhi's time also. And they are a big institution in the country. Okay. And we need to capitalize on it for public good. Okay. So if we use Manorama as a platform and say, look, we are getting domain experts who has interest in Kerala. It doesn't have to be from Kerala. Anybody who is interested in Kerala, he is our brother. Okay. And we are putting this domain expertise together. We are all going to have one big conversation, and then we're going to take domain at a time and decide what we want to do. It's a process. It won't require 3 days. It will require a lot more.
Basically, he actually said that this was the Third World War, all right? And he said that we can decide whether we want to continue like before or we should be completely different after that. It's a completely new world, the way we live, etc. And he also said that Kerala can actually be the model for transformation after COVID. The new kind of thing, Kerala can be a model for that. He talked about focusing on initially 5 areas, which was clothing. On clothing, he talked about, uniforms, clothing for the poorest of the poor, but also to look at major international luxury brands which can use the clothing. And he was basically talked about handloom and things like that there. Talked about food. He said, create the entire chain of food. Don't try to grow something with a lot of fertilizers and pesticides. Let us go back in time to our genetic, our own gene crops kind of a thing, our own fruits, our own coconuts. See what we can do with that and create the entire food chain on that, which would include cold storages and things like that. He talked about health. He said, the Kerala doctors and professionals are renowned around the world. Look at that. He mentioned about in the conversation about modernizing it to become the best in the world. But he also said, look at our traditional ways of medicine on wellness, etc. Education, something which Chandran had mentioned earlier about education. In fact, in the conversation, he had actually told me the entire system will change. He says, it is not necessary. Who told us that you need to do 3 years for a degree and 4 years for an engineering degree and 2 years for a master's? He said maybe things will change, and after a child at 12 years old can then learn at his or her own pace. And he said that has to completely change, the big changes that can happen there. He talked about the ocean, looking at, for Kerala, the big coast that we have and the kind of things we can do there. Then he talked about 2 other things, which was on housing. He talked about waste management and environment. And his interesting question, why should Kerala have so much of waste? Right? And what do we do? And so then I asked him at that point of time, I said, but what do you do? And how does one make, what is the economics behind this? How do you create jobs? He said, don't try to do it on a product. You create innovative models are what we need to do around each of these. You create an innovative model, and that model will actually create the kind of economic benefits that we want and will create jobs. And he says, don't look at creating jobs for everyone, but everyone needs to be comfortable. And that is what, and basically could be, his talk was on that basic income for all kind of a thing. He then actually talked about how to get into this on the mission mode, how the red tape and the kind of vertical silos in which government works will not really do that. You need to have work across horizontally. He talked about the polio example, which some of you would have heard, and I briefly mentioned earlier. He said, get together 100 expats from Kerala or friends of Kerala and then work out a clear plan. He says it can't be done in 2 or 3 days. It take a little longer, but let's work on that. So I've just tried to quickly summarize what Mr. Sam Pitroda said, but very interesting thoughts, a completely different thought process from what, when I wrote a note sometime back on how do we look at people coming in from China and what do we do. But he said, let's look at something completely different, and that is what we had. So I'm just going to get back to the panel, and may I request Chandran, Raj, and Tony to have their videos on so that maybe one is a reaction to what each of you all said, and then on what Sam Pitroda said, and then we will open up for questions. There are questions which have come in, and just so that I get the 3 of you to be prepared, at the end of it, I'm going to ask the 3 of you to come out with 3 main recommendations which can be made to government, 3 main recommendations which can be made to companies who are working in this period, and 3 main recommendations made to the Kerala society at large on how we face the post-COVID periods. So, shall we start with Chandran?
I mean, Sam Pitroda, as always, has very interesting thoughts, and Raj and Tony, I think a lot of what they said I agree with, and I think the fact of the matter really is, with regards to us moving forward, there are a few tangible things that we can do, right? Most importantly, from the point of view of education, with regards to mindset, and then with regards to a few things that the government can do. With regards to education, the focus on skills and vocation as opposed to a paper degree, more and more of people we hire in AI, in machine learning, even with regards to some of the automation skills we're looking for, we really don't look at the education background. We look at what they can do and how quickly they can institute changes, bring forth their ideas into some of the innovative products we're making. So education policy is something that we can work on. Now, from a societal point of view, the ability to change and accept the changes in education are also extremely important. Whether it's Singapore or whether it's India or Kerala, a lot of the Asian parental pressure on seeing a degree in a particular area still probably plays an important role. So there are some aspects of that from with regards to when Vijay asked for some recommendation from a society point of view, and I'm not sure how one can go about it without wanting to change at an individual level. The second thing is the focus on productivity. There is very often a lack of understanding individual action to overall productivity of a company or of an organization. And I think those are some areas that I would focus on. With regards to government recommendations, as when I started the discussion, it's primarily around some of the infrastructure. I really like Raj's idea of as we have so many people coming in with tremendous skills, but cannot contribute in an economic way to those skills because of things that are happening in the Middle East and other countries, to able to provide them with the framework and infrastructure to be able to take their services to the market globally, right? Either through convenient workspaces, secure connections, and so on and so forth. I think that is something that is actually very actionable, that can help a lot of people. And then finally, when it comes to something that we didn't talk too much about, and probably in some of your other sessions also, is going back a little bit to the basics and focusing on some of the agriculture and production needs that would require to be done from a local sustenance point of view. We can see it a lot in Singapore, where we have vertical farms and so on being funded by the government to be able to increase production locally to have a sustainable and secure food supply. And even though India is a very big country, when it came to things like lockdown, I think the transport of goods and people weren't as easy. And to have elements of sustainability, local sustainability, are again things that I would put some thought into, so that in times of crisis like this, it can be managed better. And then when there is no crisis, things like organic farming and so on, probably a little bit of automated and organic farming, is something that I would probably put a little bit more thought into. So that's it from me, Vijay.
Thank you, Chandran. And Mr. Pitroda's ideas are all good, and they're all big ideas, and they're sort of, they're like signposts saying we need to go this way or that way. But my interests are in the now. What do we do now so that within the next 2 or 3 years, we can begin to see some changes? And to me, self-reliance is something that's very, very important. I think with self-reliance, we become more confident, we are able to do more things, and so on. So if you take the US, for instance, America has got a lot of millionaires there. And the first thing thought is that if you stack up all the people who are multi-millionaires in the US, they may all be in technology and so on. They are not. You have the billionaires like Bill Gates and all the tech billionaires on the West Coast, and then you have some financial billionaires on the East Coast. But America has got thousands and thousands of millionaires who are actually running dry cleaning businesses, or car repair businesses, or a farm, or something else. So I think when we talk about all these things, instead of saying, we need a certain industry or certain something, I think the basic thing is, how do we empower people to become self-reliant? And they should be able to earn a living that gives them a fairly good quality of life, which is why I go back to that. And GVR asked me to talk about the project that I was working on, and on which GVR was very helpful. About 5 years ago, my wife and I said, what can we give back to Trivandrum, where we are from, and Kerala in general? And we said, one of the big issues we see is that everybody who's graduating and who's aspiring, who's done well, who's aspiring for a great job, most of them go elsewhere. They say they want to go to Bangalore to work with some IT company, or they want to go to the US to do something else. I said, why is it that everybody has to go out of Kerala to do something? And why can't we do something in Kerala? Which is why the whole thing about self-reliance, being able to be self-employed, to create income, to earn an income. So we decided that that we will take a piece of property I inherited right in the heart of Trivandrum, and we'll do a philanthropic project with about 30 crores of funding from our own side. It'll be a purely not-for-profit organization to develop innovation and enterprise. So it was called, supposedly we were going to call it the Center for Innovation Enterprise. And the goal was to train school kids as well as young adults on various things like making, whether it's, have maker shop in there where we have laser cutters and 3D printers and so on to make things with their hands. We were thinking of having a multimedia museum where we could bring in and give exposure to people from all around the world. Like if you go to Google, Google has got a Google Cultural Institute. If you go to the website, you can go into many different museums in the world and see it. And we thought we could try to do something in a bricks and mortar format where school children would come in and then be exposed to new ideas and new concepts, things that they don't learn in school, but things that will help them think very globally. So we had all these ideas, and the result was we engaged an architect in one of the top architects in Asia to develop a 7-storied building. And this was 5 years ago. It took us about 2.5 years of very hard work just to get the permit to build it. And this is the permission to start. And everything was fully compliant. Everything was, but the whole process took so long. And then we found when we were ready to break ground in January of 2019, we found that we had to get an environmental permit. And the environmental permit took about 6 to 8 months. And we were wondering why, because we are not doing anything different or strange. It's a very clean, well-designed building. But one reason I'm told that the environmental, whatever it is, board said, was normally it takes 6 months to give a permit. And if you do it faster, people think that we were bribed. So that's why we got it faster. So I thought that's a very silly excuse to say, we're going to delay this thing for 6 months. But anyway, so we thought, okay, we'll break ground around July, August of last year. That's when the new issue came up that we need a geological department's permission, a mining permit. And I just couldn't understand, this is a small 30-cent lot in the middle of the city, and I need to get a mining permit to put a building in there. So it turns out our basement, because we have basement car park and so on, there are certain parts that are like 8 meters deep. And according to certain regulations, if you're digging so much, removing soil from that plot to another plot, it is mining, and we need a mining permit. So as of 1 month ago, we still hadn't got the mining permit, because a mining permit requires no objection certification from all the neighbors who say they don't mind us mining that property. So a few weeks ago, finally, we pulled the plug. We said doing something in Kerala, especially if it means building something, especially a not-for-profit like thing, is not worth the effort. Instead, we can go online and pretty much try to do whatever we wanted to do completely online. And in fact, it was thanks to COVID, because COVID showed me that you can do a lot of things online, which I didn't think it was possible earlier. And why take on the headache of building a building and managing it and having people to manage all that when you could do with it? So GVR wanted me to say this because this is it's a 5-year journey in which both GVR and I struggled to do something and it never worked. So coming back to our discussion point, I don't think these things can be changed overnight. We can say that we want to move everything to digital, everything should be done online. Yeah, but these things will take time. And I think while I'm hoping that all those things can be streamlined into a very digital format, I think we should again go back to self-reliance and being able to get employment. And there are a couple of points that Chandran brought up, and also Mr. Pitroda brought up about agriculture and food. Now, that is something, again, that we should be looking at very carefully. You know, we have small farms, unlike the North, which our farms are much larger. We have small farms. And how do we make agriculture more productive? About 2 hours ago, I was actually talking to somebody in Pune who runs a plant biotech company. And it's very interesting. He said he creates 80 million plants, like a flowering plants a year. What he does is he brings in all the exotic plants from around the world, and then he extracts cells from it and he clones the cells. And on demand, like somebody wants, let's say, 2 million red rose plants in Holland or elsewhere, he actually grows these things in test tubes and then sends them out by air. So the ability to do creative things like that, where you are using agriculture in a very high-tech fashion, is something that we could do because we got a lot of water. We have a very educated workforce. You know, for those people who don't want to be doing office work and who want to be doing more things either in the farm or something like that, there's a lot of work to be done. And Mr. Pitroda said Kerala could be a model for the rest of India. I think it's very difficult to become a model because, especially when we really don't know how to do something, it's far easier to copy somebody. And I think Kerala should adopt a model. And the model that I'm thinking of is Israel. I've been to Israel a couple of times. They are very good at agricultural technologies. They have taken a desert and made it a huge, agricultural economy, especially in certain parts of Israel. There are things in biotech, as well as aviation, space, and all those things that Kerala has got certain elements of strength in. So rather than say, let's reinvent the process, reinvent everything we are doing, let us first try to find a good model and try to copy some of that. And when it comes to entrepreneurship and company formation, Israel is again among the top countries in the world. So with that, I'll pass it on back to GVR or to Tony. No, that GVR is there.
See, when we think about Kerala, the potential business scenario, the biggest and the most mindset change, revenue generate mindset. The revenue generation is right? Government, the role in that. Should government be doing everything? Or should government be creating policies and ensuring compliance with the policies and enable private sector or even private public partnerships to create jobs? That's a very important distinction. Coming back to Israel, or if you go to the Nordics or places like that, Kerala, everybody fears that capitalism there is a compassionate type of capitalism that a lot of Europe follows, a lot of parts of the rest of the world follows. When you have money to spend, you can spend it on social programs. Taxes are the social programs to spend. But taxes what happens is that the very little amount of money that you have, you end up creating, in many cases, artificial jobs, and then spend almost majority of your revenue sources into that. We are spending majority of our income month over month, year over year. That has to change. So how do we create more revenue? അത് ഉണ്ടാക്കണമെങ്കിൽ you have to have companies come in. അതിൽ വലിയ കമ്പനികൾ വേണമെന്നില്ല. You can have small companies come in. കാരണം നമ്മൾക്ക് ഒരുപാട് distributed kind of പല മോഡൽസ് പണ്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നത്. I think somehow or the other they've kind of gone away. Cottage industries ഒരുപാട് ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഞാൻ ചെറുപ്പത്തിൽ ഞാൻ കേട്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. പക്ഷെ ഇപ്പം ഞാൻ അധികം ഒന്നും കാണുന്നില്ല, അതിനെപ്പറ്റി കേൾക്കുന്നുമില്ല. So what happened to those? അങ്ങനെയുള്ള കുറെ കാര്യങ്ങൾ we can actually start bringing in. അതിൽ ഒരുപാട് കാര്യങ്ങളുണ്ട്, right? You can actually do in a supply chain കാര്യം, ആ വാക്ക് നമ്മൾ പലതവണ ഉപയോഗിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. ആ ഒരു ഗ്ലോബൽ സപ്ലൈ ചെയിൻ മാത്രമല്ല, ലോക്കൽ സപ്ലൈ ചെയിൻ വരുമ്പോൾ how do you disrupt that supply chain? How do you take produce from the farm, agriculture, കൃഷിക്കാരന്റെ അടുത്ത് നിന്ന് how do you take it to the table? Or how do you take it to ഒരു മാർക്കറ്റിൽ so that it can go beyond മീൻ മേടിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് വരുന്ന ഒരു ആൾക്കാരുടെ അടുത്ത് നിന്ന് how do you buy the fish at the right prices so that the middleman does not completely take the value of that whole process? അത് ഭയങ്കര ഒരു ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻ്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള കാര്യമാണ്. That is where we have to really become smarter at. അതിൽ പ്രൊഡ്യൂസ് ചെയ്യുന്നവർക്കും അതിൽ കൺസ്യൂം ചെയ്യുന്നവരുടെ ഇടയ്ക്കുള്ള ആ ഒരു ലെയേഴ്സ് ഉണ്ടല്ലോ, that has to become much more efficient. That is really not there right now. രണ്ടാമത്തെ നമ്മൾ നോക്കുമ്പോൾ if you really look at coconut for example, നമ്മൾ തെങ്ങിലെ കാര്യങ്ങൾ we are doing extremely well. തെങ്ങിന്റെ ഒരു പാർട്ട് പോലും നമ്മൾ വേസ്റ്റ് ആക്കി കളയുന്നില്ല. തെങ്ങിന്റെ ഓല കൊണ്ട് നമ്മൾ മടഞ്ഞിട്ട് അതിന്റെ റൂഫ് ഉണ്ടാക്കാൻ വേണ്ടി നമ്മൾ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നു. അതിന്റെ ചകിരി എടുത്തിട്ട് നമ്മൾ കൊയറുണ്ടാക്കുന്നു. അതിന്റെ തേങ്ങ എടുത്തിട്ട് നമ്മൾ എണ്ണ ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്നു. വി മേക്ക് കോക്കനട്ട് നമ്മൾ കുക്ക് ചെയ്യാൻ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്നു. അതിൽ നീര ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്നു, കള്ളുണ്ടാക്കുന്നു, തടി കൊണ്ട് വേറെ പല കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്നു. സോ വി നോ ഹൗ ടു ഡു ദാറ്റ് വെർട്ടിക്കൽ മോഡൽ. ഒരു സാധനം എടുത്തു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അതിന്റെ ടോപ്പ് ടു ബോട്ടം നമുക്ക് ചില കാര്യത്തിൽ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും, പക്ഷെ ചില കാര്യത്തിൽ നമ്മൾ ചെയ്യുന്നില്ല. അഗെയിൻ കമ്മിങ് ബാക്ക് ടു എ ക്ലാസിക് എക്സാമ്പിൾ ഓഫ് ഫ്രൂട്ട്സ്. ഇപ്പൊ കാഷ്യൂവിന്റെ നട്ട്സ് നമ്മൾ എടുക്കുന്നു, പക്ഷെ ഫ്രൂട്ട്സ് എന്താ ചെയ്യുക, റൈറ്റ്? നമ്മൾ if you go to Goa for example, Goans use the cashew fruit and they make feni out of it and they actually have branded it and that's become a tourist attraction for them. നമ്മൾ ശ്രീലങ്കയിൽ പോയി കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ Sri-Lankans have created arak out of coconut and the sugar canes and they have created business models out of that. നമ്മൾക്കിപ്പം റവന്യൂ വരുമ്പോഴും പക്ഷെ നമ്മളുടെ എന്താ പറയുക ഒരു ചില കാര്യങ്ങൾ നമ്മളെ beneath ആണെന്നുള്ളൊരു തോന്നലുണ്ടല്ലോ. There's absolutely nothing like that. We have to be smart and we have to be really conscious about what we are doing, as long as we are doing the right thing. Both Raj and Chandran are from Singapore. Singapore, they have gambling, right? But the gambling is in a way diverted towards the foreign tourists who come in, not necessarily for the domestic tourists domestic residents who are actually there, because that's actually a government അത് manage ചെയ്തിരിക്കുകയാണ്. Many things that we can do that can create net new jobs. നമ്മൾ ഡിജിറ്റലിന്റെ കാര്യം മാത്രമല്ല, ടെക്നോളജിയുടെ കാര്യം മാത്രമല്ല നമ്മൾ ചിന്തിക്കേണ്ടിയെന്ന് I was just trying to say that. But having said that, GBR knows this area as good as anybody else. I really believe that IT as we know it is going to change. അതിൽ പല കാര്യങ്ങളുണ്ട്. ഒന്നീ പറയുന്ന disruption, work from home, etc. പക്ഷെ I really believe that this is this whole kind of can I do more without having to expose myself? അപ്പോൾ ഒരുപാട് ആസ് എ സർവീസ്, ഒരു IT enabled സർവീസസിനുള്ള ഒരുപാട് സാധ്യതകൾ വരുന്നുണ്ട്. വി ഓൾറെഡി നോ അബൌട്ട് ടെലിമെഡിസിൻസ്. ഇപ്പൊ കേരളത്തിൽ തന്നെ എവറിബഡി നോസ് അബൌട്ട് കേരളാസ് സക്സസ് ഇൻ ഹാൻഡ്ലിംഗ് COVID. Now, is there something that we can now take it to the next level and say that, hey, you know what, we have doctors here, we have telemedicine here, you know what, why don't you become a subscriber to something that we are doing? We can, we have Ayurveda, we have, immunity driven programs that we can help you, etc., etc. The many things that we can come up with. We have online education, right? Again, Kerala has a lot of, teachers and people who can teach and people with the right level of experience. So instead of, the traditional academics as we know it, are there things that we can do with education? About IT enabled services, the as a service, അങ്ങനെയുള്ള ഒരുപാട് കാര്യങ്ങൾ we can actually do that. Talent export will still remain as one of the largest sources of revenue for us. But I'm not a big fan of that. Having lived most of my life outside Kerala, I really would say that we should create a scenario where you don't really have to travel out of Kerala to get a job that is reasonably paying. I don't know whether it was Raj or Chandran who used the example of the New York example, where you're actually going to work from home in New York for Twitter. അതുകൊണ്ട് പക്ഷേ കേരളത്തിൽ നിന്ന് വർക്ക് ചെയ്യുന്ന എന്താ വ്യത്യാസം എന്താണ്? You can actually do that. അതിനുള്ള കുറച്ച് ഓപ്പർച്യൂണിറ്റീസ് നമ്മൾ ഉണ്ടാക്കുക. നമുക്ക് ഇൻഫ്രാസ്ട്രക്ചർ ഉണ്ട് ഓൾറെഡി. ഗവൺമെന്റ് is already investing very heavily in the whole traditional infrastructure that can enable that. So how do you take it to the next level? Namak FACT and Indian Oil Corporation, Titanium, ISRO, are there adjacencies that we can create in this industry so that, again, supply chain, that becomes a little bit more enabling rather than just producing that end product. So you can really do a lot of these things. Lastly, the thing that I've been always preaching was digital make in India or digital make in Kerala. See, you cannot have a traditional manufacturing in Kerala as we know it. പല കാരണങ്ങളുണ്ട്, യൂണിയൻ ഉണ്ട്, നമ്മൾക്ക് സ്ഥലമില്ലാത്ത സ്ഥലത്തിന്റെ ദൗർലഭ്യമുണ്ട്, പൊല്യൂഷന്റെ പ്രശ്നങ്ങളുണ്ട്. There are so many things. But you know what? In today's world, you can run a factory from wherever you are. You don't necessarily have to be at the factory floor. When ഞാൻ ജിയിൽ കുറെ നാളുണ്ടായിരുന്നു, I was at Nissan, Vodafone, നമ്മൾ പല മാനുഫാക്ചറിംഗ് സെൻട്രിക് ആയിട്ടുള്ള പല കമ്പനീസിലും ഞാൻ ഇരുന്നിട്ടുള്ളതാണ്. In the old days, what we used to do was the machines had the levers literally adjust, connected to the machine. അപ്പോൾ അതുകൊണ്ട് ഷോപ്പ് ഫ്ലോറിൽ മെഷീൻ ഓപ്പറേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ വേണ്ടി ഓപ്പറേറ്റേഴ്സ് ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. കുറച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞപ്പോൾ ആ മെഷീന്റെ ഈ ലിവർ എല്ലാം എടുത്തിട്ട് കമ്പ്യൂട്ടറൈസ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് വൈഡ് ഏരിയ നെറ്റ്വർക്ക് വഴിയും ലോക്കൽ ഏരിയ നെറ്റ്വർക്ക് വഴിയും you started moving to a command center and then watching it from there and you started controlling that. പക്ഷേ ഇപ്പം you can actually control those factories remotely. I can run a factory from Kerala that is physically in Brazil. But why are we, not thinking about some of those things? What you do is that on one front you create a lot of jobs to repatriate some of the expats that we have, provide a lot of jobs for the lower qualified, if I may use that term. പക്ഷേ നമുക്ക് കുറെ ഹൈ വാല്യൂ ഹൈ പേയിങ് ജോബ്സ് നമുക്ക് ധാരാളം ഉണ്ടാക്കാൻ പറ്റും. അപ്പൊ അതിന്റെ ഗുണം എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ചാൽ that creates more cash into the system. ഒരു high value employment ഉള്ള ഒരാൾ will create many other jobs in the process, will spend much more money, that will bring more money back into the exchequer, etc. So we have to really start thinking a new paradigm. I don't know who, I think it was Sam Pitroda who talked about creating a collection of smart people who can bring this നമ്മുടെ പഴയ planning board സ്റ്റൈലിലുള്ള മൈൻഡ് സെറ്റ് മാറ്റിയിട്ട് we have to start thinking about preparing for the future. What do we need to prepare for the future? Now to prepare for the future, എന്താണ് കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഇന്നത്തെ മാത്രമല്ല നാളെ മറ്റന്നാൾ നടക്കാൻ പോകുന്നത് എന്താ? How do you have a comprehensive rebuild Kerala? നമ്മളിപ്പോൾ അറിയുന്ന പോലെയല്ല, but rebuild for the future so that we can create new jobs, new revenue, etc. And lastly, flawless execution. കാരണം എല്ലാ പ്രോജക്റ്റും വരുമ്പോൾ പറ്റുന്ന എന്താണെന്ന് വെച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ the execution fails. കാരണം അതിൽ ഒരുപാട് vested interest ഉണ്ട്. So how do you bring the right level of controls and manage that forward? So there are, again, coming back to what I said earlier in my first segment, I think there's a lot of opportunity. It's not lack of opportunity. It is about the mindset. How we're going to change that and how we're going to capitalize.
Thanks, Tony, Raj, and Chandran for those points. We will now open for some of the questions, and I'm going to ask a question. I'll point it to one of you all. This is something which maybe I think both Tony and Chandran should be able to respond to. This is from Krishnakumar Nair. We keep hearing in the press that many US Japanese companies, including Apple, are moving out of China. How can Kerala attract at least a few of them? He's saying at least a few of them. What are the action points? What should we do for that? Maybe if you each can take a minute and give me your thoughts on that, would be great. Tony first.
Number one, and I know US market quite well. I really don't believe that a lot of the work from China is going to come into India personally, because US has already Mexico right next to it. Mexico is doing absolutely reasonably very well. And you have a larger, broader Latin American market that is in the same time zone, almost very similar culturally as well, aligned to more than what we have. So I feel that the opportunity from China, and as you know, a lot of the manufacturing in China is actually for the US market, I think will go into probably more Mexico and beyond. Then if you come back into Japan, that's the example that everybody talks about, the $2.2 billion that Japan is earmarked. But again, if you read between the lines, like I said earlier, 91% of that money is to repatriate jobs back into Japan, not to take it elsewhere. So what is left is about only 9% or about $200 million. Now, what do you do with that? So my point of view is that if we have not been able to capitalize the manufacturing opportunity before, this is not going to give us any additional opportunity. What we have not done before, why haven't we done before, excelled before? So we have to fix all those problems, not because the other guy is going to fall down, so I'm going to catch it. That mindset, I'm not a big fan of, and I don't believe that's going to work.
Okay. Chandran?
Yeah, very similar to what Tony said. I also subscribe to the fact that we don't need to have to catch what China is dropping. The highest. So first of all, a lot of it is going to be insured, like insured, close or close to shore, like in Mexico or in the US itself. The opportunity when we look at servicing these large companies are really in the new areas of seeing how applications or their own devices we can add value through our embedded technologies and through machine learning and AI. Those are new areas that will give us growth. Taking manufacturing for the sake of manufacturing, unless it's really high value manufacturing, I don't subscribe to. Otherwise, it'll end up like what happened with southern China in the old days with highly polluting industries and so on.
Yeah, so I agree absolutely with what Tony and Chandran were saying. But I think let's assume that everything's the same in terms of economics, that whether it's Mexico or Kerala is the same. Then there are a whole bunch of things that we don't usually pay much attention to, which is that the people, the senior people who will come to set it up and so on, do they find life in Kerala as desirable or better than going to Mexico or somewhere else? When Singapore first started attracting multinational companies to come here, they made sure there were top-notch international schools for the children of these senior managers can attend these schools. They made sure there are clubs and things like that, so the spouses of these people can socialize and do all these. So there's a whole ecosystem that needs to be built up. I remember going to a housing estate called, I think it's called Palm Meadows in Whitefield. I'm talking about 20 years ago. I was just blown away. It looked like it was California transplanted to Bangalore. Gated community with beautiful homes, beautiful resort-like gym and hotel and so on. And most of the people there were actually Indians working in the US or elsewhere, who are very senior people in various technology companies, who came back and they found this a suitable or comparable quality of life in India. So needless to say that regardless if everything else is the same, we still need to be able to create that quality of life. And Kerala is a very hostile place for most non-Keralites and non-Indians for that matter.
Yeah, Raj, I will add to that as well, because I've personally been a big champion or fighter for social infrastructure, as I call it. Let me use the example of Nissan, for example. When we were trying to get folks from outside Kerala, by the way, I used to live in Palm Meadows, so I know exactly what you're talking about. So the example that I used to talk about was that, hey, when you start moving people from, and we are only talking about, because we want to give the fresh grads as much as possible, at least 50% from Kerala, but a lot of the times you might not find the senior level talent that you're looking for in certain areas. So you have to move them from either Bangalore or Chennai or Delhi, etc. So what happens is that during the course of the school year, the father would say, if the father is moving to Kerala, because let's assume that the wife is working in another part. The real issue is that can the wife also get a job in Kerala? It's very difficult, right? Number one. Number two, they say that, okay, we love the job so much, we love the company, we want to move there. Now they decide to move. But the first part is, okay, middle of the school year, so what we're going to do is travel back and forth for the next, 3 to 4 months. Gee, guess what? We don't have enough proper connecting flights to most of the critical cities in India, right? So we have a real big problem with that. Now, even if you go through that, let's assume that, that is something that they would do, then decide to bring the wife and the family back to Kerala, exactly as you said. After a long day's worth of work and they want to go and sit and have a drink and have a meal as a family. Oh, gee, you can't do that, right? Because, Kerala, we don't allow that. That is beneath us. Whereas if it is in Bangalore, I can go to, any of the pubs and microbreweries or, wherever else, or including the Palm Meadows, you can go to the club there and then, sit and have a drink with your family, right? So you're not really, and I'm not talking about schools, I'm not talking about garbage, I'm not talking about the rest of the stuff. I'm just simply talking about, at the end of the day, why do people work? People work to have quality of life. If we cannot provide that quality of life, then just having some jobs and saying, you know what, you people, you come to work here is not going to happen. So that has to change. And for that, the mindset has to change. Again, alcohol is a classic example, because when it comes to that, you know what, there are so many vested interests that we are trying to appease. And then on the other front, we are saying that, you know what, we want to bring jobs in and we want to have people work here. That's not going to happen. You either decide that we are going to be an authoritarian, religion-driven, old mindset, conservative society. And you know what, we don't have jobs here. We don't care about jobs. All of us will go to Middle East. All of us go to Singapore, Japan, America, wherever. We make money, come back, and then, you know what, we pretend like, we are better than the rest of the world.
Yeah, Raj, this is actually, you talked about the, people coming back and all that, and you looked at Dubai, etc. Now, one of the things they say is that, would this be an opportunity for people even in the Middle East to change their mindset? Because presently they would actually fly a guy down to Dubai and tell him that come for an interview because they want to see the person. Okay, now, are those things which are going to change with the kind of thing that is there, with even large companies saying, irrespective of the senior guy, let us see. Otherwise, you generally need to have a face-to-face, even if you have Skype. What do you say about that?
I think a lot of the interview process would be Skype or Zoom or whatever, video-driven. But if you're hiring a senior executive, I don't think I would ever hire anyone without seeing them and having a face-to-face interaction.
Great.
But again, an interview process for a senior person could take 5 to 6 months.
True.
So a lot of the early levels of interviews and so on can be done entirely through remote video conferencing. And the final decisions be done in person. Who was
asked, semiconductor manufacturing needs clean rooms, and I'm not sure whether the weaving, I think it's a sarcastic comment, I'm not taking that on. He's talking about the kumkum culture, the saris and all, would it have a problem there? Frankly, let me answer that. I should probably tell you that when the blood bag manufacturing was started in Trivandrum by a company called Penpal, which is today called Thermo Penpal, when the Japanese came in to look at their clean rooms, it was probably one of the best, they said. Okay, so let us not start thinking that our people are not capable of doing that. Okay, so very clearly, and in fact, Thermo Penpal grew to become one of the biggest blood bag manufacturers, and the founder is actually on the panel a day after tomorrow. Mr. Balagopal is on the panel. So very clearly, the thing is, yes, we can do it. Do we have the will and the capability to question? But I think it's nothing which we say we really can't do. This is from a gentleman called Pragya Srivastava. Gradually, AI is going to bring a revolution. It will surely help manufacturing businesses. But what impact will it have on the workforce and labor? Maybe a couple of you want to give it a go. Because the moment you talk of robotics, AI, machine learning, people think jobs are going to be lost. Aren't that many jobs going to be lost?
I can probably start with it, and both Chandra and Raj can respond that. I am a big believer that the jobs are, the net jobs are not going to be lost. There will be shifting of the jobs, right? Instead of doing manual, tedious, repeatable jobs a lot, you might be doing a little bit more high-end jobs in, preparing some of these things. And I've like I said, I've worked at GE, I've worked at Nissan, Vodafone, etc., where we've actually never seen the number of jobs go down, although we've been adopting net new technologies, including 3D printing, right? We actually see more distributed manufacturing and more higher number of jobs that are being created. But will I have a job in taking something from from here and then probably tightening the screw over and over for the next 25 years? Maybe not. Maybe that job is going to go away. But instead, software is going to become as ubiquitous as tightening the screw. So everyone, software will become part of, pretty much every employee's life in every company in the future. Every job is going to have a level of software, a level of artificial intelligence in that. So the way I see it is that, just like how much the physical labor was part of the industrial revolution, now we are in the digital revolution. Software and data would be part of pretty much every job, and the net number of jobs might not go down. It's just that the value, the type of jobs might shift here and there. Is my personal opinion.
This is something that's very close to heart, especially when I transitioned from a very manufacturing-centric company, and for a few years was doing things in especially logistic robotics. And case in point is, some of you who are into pastas and like pastas, there's this large Italian company called Barelli, and they make. They have a large market share. The one plant I visited, they make 1,000 tons of pasta a day. And they have the central distribution house close to Parma in Italy. It's about 400 meters wide and 800 meters long, and probably about 3 or 4 stories high, fully automated. I think there were no more than 15 people in that warehouse. Everything else was automated AGVs that would go in and take things for the forklift, take the crates and so on. And it is close to Parma. It was in a small village, and I asked both the CEO of the automation company and Barelli, and the answer was similar to what Tony said. The net job actually increased, right? So that is a part of the story. Now the thing is, some societies, in terms of employers and governments, are very, very proactive about making sure that people are upskilled to take these new jobs. If that is not deliberate, then they can lead to large losses in employment, with semi-skilled or underskilled people not being able to keep up with the changes. And so that is the balance that society, in terms of both employers and governments, need to take into account. There are some provinces in China that have done a fantastic job of reskilling people to be able to meet the changing needs of industry. And so the caveat is, I think net it will be good, but there is a social responsibility on the part of employers and the governments to be deliberate about training the workforce.
There's a question from Rahul George, who's asked, what do you think about the automobile industry and especially the dealerships, and Kerala doesn't have manufacturing as such, but about dealerships. What do you think is going to be the change there?
Before I answer that, let me just say on the reskilling, I can't agree more with Chandran on that. But what we have seen as examples in the auto industry in Detroit and various parts of other parts of the world, this reskilling is easier said than done. Imagine you are in your 50s and you are tightening nuts and bolts. Suddenly you have to reskill to do something else that you have absolutely no idea how to do it. There is a certain adaptability. It's again what Chandran talked about earlier about Darwin saying that you need to be adaptable. That adaptability, I think, declines with age. So the impact would be that many of the older workers would be unemployed. Sure, the number of employees would increase, but some of the older workers may never find employment after that. So going back to auto dealerships and so on. I'm not an expert in this area, but using common sense, I'd say a lot of the income for the dealership is from repairs and warranty. Things covered under warranty, which they provide the service, and they are compensated by the manufacturer while it's under warranty, and after warranty, they're paid by the clients. I think with more and more electric vehicles coming out, there are fewer and fewer moving parts. And also things are not going to break down or need to be, I think the need for repair will go down for electric vehicles. And because of that, I really don't think that the dealership as we know it may not exist in the future. So that's just I could be completely wrong, but that's just my view on it.
I can add to that coming from auto industry. You, more or less, I agree with Raj. The dealership as we know it today might change from a buying quite a bit, because e-commerce, there are already, you can actually buy cars online in many parts of the world already as we know it. The only reason why dealerships are still quite important in the West, and US is predominantly because it is protected by regulations. But I think that is going to change quite a bit. Coming back into the service as well, with electric, with autonomous, etc., a lot of the service also, the amount of service that is required, because the number of moving parts in the vehicles are coming down dramatically. But a bigger change is going to be the Ubers and the kind of the mobility as a service kind of models that are coming in. In that scenario, what would happen is that just like we have in KSRTC, where KSRTC is actually maintaining their own vehicles, the large mobility as a service provider would either be maintaining their own vehicles directly, or a car company. For example, Nissan might say that I'm going to provide kilometers instead of I'm going to give you a car. So then the entire maintenance, subscription, everything is managed by the car company as well. So that model is completely going to be, the current car buying, selling, servicing model is going to be disrupted quite a bit. Work is already in progress, and I really believe that in the next few years, once the regulation aligns with it, you will see a big change in that segment.
After COVID-19, what is going to happen with regard to public transport, buses, and things like that? It's probably a very general question, but your thoughts, especially when both of you, at least two of you from Singapore, where the public transportation system is so good. What do you think are the big changes which could happen there? Even Japan transport is great.
I think public transportation is still being used by people in Singapore. It's just that the number of people who get into a bus or into a train, it's probably about 50% of the capacity, because you have space marked, you need to social distancing, and there are crosses marked on the seats so that you don't sit there. So I don't think public transportation, maybe because the capacity per bus or per train goes down, maybe they will run even more of that. So there could be increase in public transportation needs.
Again, as many of you know, in Singapore, the government is very involved with public policy and making sure that it's adhered to. So one of the things that, because we have manufacturing plants in Singapore, and as we have started ramping back up, one of the things that the government is working with each company is to stagger starting times of the different shifts. Because like Raj said, the density will have to be decreased, right? Especially during this period until there is either a vaccine or there is more certainty that COVID-19 has died out. Until then, the different kinds of safe distancing measures will have to be in place. So the government is working with a lot of companies that have that still need to have workforce on premise, like the manufacturing teams and so on, to stagger the starting time of the shifts. And so those kind of policies, I think, will probably be in place to make sure that the public transport continues to be efficient while reducing the density of usage.
Let me just continue a bit on this. I'm sure there are so many questions, but before you go, Chandran, then maybe you need to give me your recommendations. And one of the things would be, what should change? Okay, things, we know that's going to be a different world. What should change, and some priority on that. I'll come back to you after. Just think about it. We'll just go through a couple of questions, but if you can give your concluding remarks, we'll try to close by around 5:15 or so. There were about 250 people on the call, and I think around we are actually competing with somebody else today. That's Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman had a press conference at 4, but still we have over 180 people still on the call, and I think those numbers are still changing. Good. Anyway, one is this is a question which I've seen, which talked about what will be the change for small retail business. What do you think is going to happen for them?
I can give you an example. We've invested in a company with several unique retail outlets in Thailand, and they have actually they're selling very high-end furniture, home furnishings, fittings, furniture, things like that. And they are they're catering to sort of high-level clientele, and there are probably 20 different outlets in various malls and across Bangkok. So when this whole before the lockdown came up, we were all concerned that, like nobody is going to come out to those retail outlets and do anything. So we tried the company actually did something quite creative. They said, our shops are all closed for walk-in customers. If you want to come in, you have to set an appointment, and then we will cater to you, and we'll make sure there are only about 5 people in the shop so that you will not be near anybody and so on. Initially, I thought that was kind of a silly idea, but you won't believe it. The calendar was fully booked. Clients were going online and booking a time, like going to a dentist or something like that, but they were actually going in there. And the sales efficacy actually went up, because when you go there, they're already going, well, today my outing is to go to this particular store to check new sofas or couches or something. And the salespeople, they knew who exactly was coming and were prepared to sell. So there are creative ways of behavioral change through which I think small retailers may also survive.
Just a comment from somebody called Isaac. We need transformative leadership like Sam Pitroda to transform ourselves. We need thoroughly new thought process, as we have heard from him. Would this be recommended to government? Well, whatever he said and whatever this panel is saying will go to government. Now, this is a question which came in from somebody called Sudhakaran. I think I lost his question. Let me just, no enterprise can survive unless the costs are properly managed. And he says, states which have surpassed 40% mark on their monthly revenue located for maintaining the 3, that is salaries. He's talking about the government's cost of government being high. That's a completely different discussion, and so we may not take that on. Let me just. What is the kind of change you see in consumer buying mindset post this lockdown? There's a question from Nithya, and she's asking, which are the sectors which will thrive, which sectors will drastically be affected, and what is the strategy should a young entrepreneur in Kerala apply to? Probably she's an entrepreneur who's working in some sector, and she's worried about consumer buying in this sector.
I'm sorry, I don't think I can come up with an answer for that. It depends on whether you are selling something tangible or intangible, whether it's online or offline. Because there are too many variables in there. But in any situation, there are opportunities. So you can't just say that because of COVID, we're going to all sit back and not do any business or not start companies.
So to just add to what Raj said, I can give you a little bit of insight from a technology point of view on what is currently in high demand, right? So the nature of the business that I work in, we basically serve chip companies, primarily high-end chips. So what we are seeing is a very high demand in server products, chips that go into server products, a very high demand for chips that go into big data farms, and a very high demand for chips that go into call them AI chips, right? Application-specific chips that target on AI. Now, these are some technology areas that, at least in the short to mid-term, are growing. But then back to what Raj alluded to, a lot of things in the consumer market depend also on the model you choose to go to market. So online versus offline, essential buys in times of crisis versus not so essential buys. So those are things without a little bit more detail into the nature of the business. It may be difficult to give some generic answers.
This is a question specifically addressed to Raj and Tony, someone whom we all know, E.M. Najib. Tourism industry is worst affected by COVID-19. What is going to be the future of tourism, and when do you think it will get revived?
Hello, Najib, and thank you for the question. Frankly, I don't know. As I said earlier, if you're looking at high-end tourism, I think it's going to take a long time before that comes back. But if you're looking at sort of middle to low level tourism, that may bounce back soon after the lockdowns end. So besides that, if you know the answer, please let me know, because we own a lot of hotels through our portfolio companies.
A lot of it depends on the airline opening up and the traffic associated with that. Hopefully that will come in. I also really believe that this is my personal feeling. I think tourism as we know it in Kerala is really outdated. We are still selling the old Kathakalis and the houseboats, through the polluted waters. We need to move away from that and then start creating something that is a little bit more experiential, so that people who come in, the large spenders would want to come to Kerala. So what are the things that we can do? We already spoke about that whole healthcare related tourism that we can start pushing, because Kerala already has a brand in that. So how do we tie the healthcare side of that plus the traditional tourism that we have? Two, a lot of people have been logged in, given the first opportunity, and knowing that I am going to be safe where I'm going, and worst case, if something bad happens, I'm taken care of, then you know what, I might bite at that opportunity. So is there something that then we can brand ourselves, market ourselves, etc.? Because you saw the crowd in the Florida beaches and the California beaches, etc., when they started opening up, because people really want to get out. I actually read an article, I think about a week ago, that next year's entire cruise inventory is sold out. So people are already willing to get out of their rooms and then go and do something. So I think there is an opportunity in here, but I really believe that we need to pivot ourselves, re-anchor ourselves, and just sell something that is a little bit more attractive to the high spenders.
Yeah, this is a question to all of you. This is from Rinu Kurian. Do you think the gig economy is going to be a threat for the employees, individual projects, and reduce their overheads?
A gig employee is an employee as well, right? A gig employee is an employee as well. So I really don't understand the difference in that. I really feel that gig economy actually gives in more opportunities to people, because you can put the right expert to do the right job, and you can actually then pick and choose. And I think this really helps, for example, women who probably cannot do full-time jobs, but they want to do specific hours or specific outcomes that they can start driving, etc. So I think, in my opinion, I don't really think that it is a disadvantage to anybody. If you have to compete and you have to win in that market, you win in that market. But I think it opens up a new set of employees that probably corporates would never have had access to in the past.
In fact, my feeling on that is that it is actually going to be better for the really good talent. Okay, somebody who is very talented would probably prefer not to be working 24/7 for a specific company. They would say, I'll take up this work and then I'll take a break when I want. And I've seen some of them, and actually their income levels have substantially gone up. So clearly, I don't think it's going to be, at least for the really good, talented people, I don't think that's going to be a problem at all. We will go for one more question, and then I'm going to go to Chandran for his final recommendation. Then I'll come to both of you all. How can we convert the advantages of Kerala to tap into opportunities thrown up by the COVID situation to generate employment in a massive scale? What should the different stakeholders be doing for this? Probably this is from Unishankar, but I think you can answer that as part of your final recommendations, which are coming up. So I think we come to the concluding part of this, and as the three of you prepare to give your final this thing, because I'll start off with it's been interesting for me. Just remember, for everyone on the call, we have a session tomorrow. The second webinar is at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and the third one is at 10 o'clock on Friday morning. And we have 6 panelists tomorrow and another 6 panelists the day after. And you will get the details in the Manorama tomorrow, or they will send it out to people who have registered for that. But Chandran, can we have your final comments, thoughts, suggestions? Sure. And then I'm going to ask Raj, Tony, and then, of course, probably try to sum up the discussions overall.
Sure. Before I start, I first of all wanted to thank you and Manorama for organizing this. I wanted to thank the co-panelists and also apologize ahead of time, because I will drop out after I finish, because I need to get on another call. So I apologize to the audience and to the panelists that I will be doing that. Okay, so the 3 areas, Vijayaraghavan, that you spoke about were recommendations to the government, public perception, and to companies, right?
Also, what should change? This includes what should change.
Okay, so I'll make it brief. With regards to starting with the government, some deliberate policies on education and upskilling of workforce with a very important connection to industry. So what I have seen in China with the more than 15 years I've worked in China and in Singapore is that there is a deliberate connection between what is happening in the economy today and 5 years from now and 10 years from now, and tying that closely to both the formal and informal education required to make sure that the local population is trained to benefit from those jobs, right? So that is one recommendation that I think is tangible and doable. The second recommendation is, of course, with regards to spending on the right infrastructure, especially the tools to increase bandwidth with all these remote collaboration skills that are required, right? So infrastructure development. And then to put a little bit of thought of understanding what kind of manufacturing needs to be supported, hopefully not the polluting kind, and what is the infrastructure with regards to transport and accessibility. I think Tony mentioned also things like flight connectivity, land connectivity, and rail connectivity to the important centers to make sure that Kerala is the right place to put some of these investments in. Now, with regards to the public itself, right? I mean, I think we have probably the most educated workforce in India, but we also have, unfortunately, very often the least productive, right? So unfortunately, there's an inverse proportion to education versus productivity in many cases, primarily due to the large number of closures for different reasons that are politically linked. So I think there has to be some amount of discipline focused towards increasing productivity. Now, with regards to companies during this difficult time, again, my knowledge is very limited towards technology. So it may or may not be applicable to all. But in the technology area, especially in software technology and with the regards to provide services to companies, I think we are very, very well equipped in Kerala to be able to provide high-end, high-margin services, engineering services and other professional services to companies with the current infrastructure we have and with the professionalism lot of our people have both inside and outside Kerala, right? Malayalis in Kerala and outside Kerala, and that needs to be articulated well and mined in a good way.
Thank you very much. Very informative, interesting insights. Your experience from China. In fact, Raj had arranged through Chandran and three of us, along with somebody from Singapore, did spend about in China. See the kind. Great thoughts. Thank you very much, Chandran, and all the best in your new assignment which you've taken on recently.
Thanks.
Maybe we should get your company to come and do something in Kerala. We'll try that.
Yes. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Chandran. Raj.
I'm not going to follow your format of 3 for the government, 3 for companies, and 3 for society. I'll just say there are 3 recommendations, and I think I've already spoken about that while we were discussing earlier. One is this thing all about remote working. I think the government and companies should really look at setting up these remote working studios as enablers for people to sell their services either by themselves or form small companies. The whole focus should be on small enterprise formation and provide service across the world. That's one thing. The second thing is education. We've spoken a lot about education. I think education is ready for complete disruption. We should look at revamping education so that we teach people a skill so that when they come out of high school, they should be able to earn a living doing something that is value added. So I'm saying it should go more towards a vocational training as well as other things, because in Germany, for instance, only a few people go to college. A lot of others go into the apprenticeship program and then go through that. And they eventually go on to become CEOs of companies. So it's not that you need a 3-year college degree or a master's degree and so on. But look at education in such a way that students graduating from schools and colleges come out with skills to make things, to do things on a global scale. Okay. It also requires a lot of re-engineering of the social skills, different languages. Can you speak, if you're going to be selling services sitting in Kerala to Germany, you better speak a little bit of German, right? So foreign languages, the ability to present themselves well through video, how to groom themselves well, there are various soft skills that need to be, or even in English, there are a lot of soft skills that need to go into this education thing. So education is my number 2 thing, which needs a little bit of, a lot of re-engineering. And the last thing is about agriculture. And I think intuitively I feel Kerala, instead of saying we are going to be the biggest chip producer or biggest pharmaceutical manufacturer, I think we should look into our own Ayurveda, our own agriculture. There's a lot to offer for the rest of India as for the rest of the world. And we should seriously look at Israel as a model. And I would recommend that the government have a special commission that goes to Israel on a fact-finding thing and try to establish links. So there is we have an old link from Jewtown and Kochi into Israel. Maybe we can reactivate that and then make it much more commercially viable with a stronger link between Israel and Kerala.
Thank you, Raj, on that interesting thoughts. And actually, they are called the Kochinis. Everyone who came from Kerala is actually called the Kochini in Israel. There's a group of people who actually, many of them don't even know Malayalam well, but they still long to come back. And many of them come back every year to Kochi. So interesting thoughts there. Tony.
So before I start with what the government should do, I want to remind ourselves of what JFK said, right? Ask not what the country should do for you, but what you should do for the country. The real problem in Kerala is not the government. The real problem in Kerala is us. We allow the bad things. Our behaviors feed the bad behaviors that the government and other people have. For example, we are sitting today and talking about new industries coming to Kerala, new IT companies coming to Kerala. Well, there was a big hoopla about using a private company for something about as recent as a month ago, right? Because everybody wants to use only the government seeded as the IT provider for everything that we do. See, as long as we believe that only government can provide the service or only KSRTC can provide the service while it is running on heavy losses, we are never going to get out of it. 100 people, 100 union employees stopped the development of Trivandrum Airport. 100 union employees. They basically stopped the development of entire South Kerala and South Tamil Nadu because of that, because what they did. Kerala government came up with an idea to distill our own alcohol in Kerala because we buy that today from Karnataka and other places. And, we are one of the largest alcohol consuming states. You know what? Oh, no, that didn't affect that. That is beyond our morality. So we again are still buying that alcohol from Karnataka instead of brewing that ourselves and using that. That is because of the heavy politicization of us as human beings, as individuals, and everything that we do, we look through the lens of politics or through the lens of religion. So we need to change that. We need to change that about ourselves. That is number 1. Number 2, like I completely agree with Raj, there is probably not everything that we can do. We should really look at what we are good at. Tourism, we are actually good at tourism. So then how do we anchor that, pivot that and take it to the next level? Because that is going to create a lot of quote unquote exposure of Kerala to many people. And that in itself could bring in net new businesses for us. And that again, it might not be the traditional tourism as we know it, but we have to really figure out where that goes. Second, agriculture. Agriculture, fishing, some of these traditional areas where the supply chain is very weak, and the producers are not really getting the value of the produce that they're doing. So how can we really better productivity in agriculture, B, have better supply chain so that the consumers actually the price between what the consumer pays and what the producer gets is that difference is minimal. Lastly, IT enabled services, because like I said, as a service is becoming everything that we talked about. The net new future is about as a service, and that means that our smart people can sit in Kerala and do work for other companies. So these kind of things, I think these are probably the industries that we need to focus on. Lastly, the role of the government. Government has to change from I am the job producer. Government is not the job producer. Even if government tries everything, they will never be able to give more than 5 to 10% of the jobs that are really needed. So how can government then become enabler of jobs, enabler of companies and people who can create jobs and take it to the next level? How can government enable skill-based education like Raj talked about? Because skill is what is really required, not a degree. A lot of the things that are still taught in mechanical engineering is still in automotive, that are actually outdated, that we don't use anymore, right? Electrical, the same way. So we need to really move away from some of those things and move towards, what is it that is going to create. Government should focus on social security, insurances. Now we have a lot of people, and you brought up about the small companies, the daily wage earners, they are actually, today they don't have any income. What is the job protection for them? Can we provide those kind of social securities? And it might not be directly going, government paying for it. It could be again a PPP model whereby government can subsidize, for those who can't afford it, etc., or make it a responsibility of the employer as well to provide some of that. So we have to really think about the role of the government, the role of the individual, and role of the industry in a net new paradigm is what I feel. And I think if we do that, we can go to the next phase. Otherwise, again, I've been in this kind of conversations before. I absolutely see no difference today than a few years ago. So we'll continue this kind of conversation.
An interesting thing, I just saw a question which had come in, and I'm just going to read that out. It's actually from Tanya, and she says the hindrance for growth is in terms of morality. Refer to Feni in Goa, okay? Feni in Goa. And then she says that, and certain socio-political, socio-cultural aspects like labor units, how do you see these being tackled? And she says we are deeply embedded in moral issues in our society, which are doing more harm than good. But anyway, so thank you very much. Excellent panel. As all of you know, it's Koshamanda Finance who are part of who sponsored this whole program. Very clearly, thank you, Koshamanda Finance, for that. But before I conclude, the learnings from the three of you is really great. Okay, and I'm sure that these will be captured today by the team of Manorama who are there. A few minutes ago, we were over 170 people on this call, 160 people in this call, which means we did have a very good response to this thing without too much of a publicity that was there. But Raj, Chandran, Tony, thank you very much for your time. I know all three of you, the commitment that you have to Kerala, to the younger generation that is there. And thank you very, very much for the time. I know this whole thing was organized at short notice, but and it's actually nearly 7:45, 8 there. But thank you for being on the call, and thank you again, and thank you Manorama for organizing this. And I'm sure that the inputs from this will definitely help as we go forward. But thank you very much again. Thank you all of those who were on this as attendees. So thank you very much.